Hi, I'm Megan from meganplus5.com and welcome to another one of my craft tutorials. Today we're going to be painting these hand-cut wood pumpkins. So I've made this craft super simple. You can pick up a kit at meganplus5.com or you can head over to my Etsy shop. It is Etsy/4daughter-boutique. And there's two different styles to choose from. You can choose just the wood cutouts if you already have the paint and the wax and everything, or you can choose the premium kit, which comes with the wood cutouts and the paints and everything that you need to complete this craft. So you'll need your wood cutouts, a couple of paintbrushes, a round sponge brush, a paint tray. If you don't have a paint tray, you can use a paper plate or even a piece of cardboard. Antiquing wax and a chip brush. If you don't have a chip brush, you can also use a sponge brush. I just don't recommend using your good paint brushes because it is wax and it will build up and it doesn't wash away easily. Orange and white acrylic paint, wide painter's tape, a lint-free cloth, and a piece of sandpaper. So you can paint yours however you want to, but for this tutorial I'm going to do this one white with orange polka dots, this one orange with white polka dots, and this one orange with white stripes. So you want to first go ahead and paint the base, and I always paint the front and the back of my pieces just to give them a super finished look, but if you aren't worried about seeing the back, then you don't have to worry about painting the backs of them. And you just want to do a really thin layer of paint on there. You don't want it too thick because the thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. So you want to be able to still see the wood grain through your paint. And then after you have 2 coats on the front and 1 coat on the back, you want to let them dry completely before you move on to the next step. So once your pumpkins are dry, you can start adding the accent colors. So on this one, we're going to do orange polka dots. On this one, we're going to do white polka dots. And on this one, we're going to do white stripes. I'm using an old sponge, which is why it has the white tip on here. You just want to make sure that no matter what sponge you use, that it's not wet, that it's totally dry, because it does take in a lot of water, and you don't want that water to be dripping out whenever you go to push it down on your pumpkin. So you just want to dab it in your paint. Move these brushes out of the way. So you just want to dab it, make sure the whole circle is covered in paint, and then just dab off the excess there. And you can just randomly put these wherever. I usually will put a few going off of the pumpkin, just because I like the look of that. And you can kind of make a little circle motion and then kind of dab it up and down on there. And you can even twist the sponge brush if you need to. You just don't want to push it all the way down, because then it will force the paint out and outside of the area there. And you can just eyeball it, and if you want to add more in, you can add more in. And if you want to even add in some accent polka dots, like little tiny ones, you can use the end of the brush here and just dip it in there. And I'll use my paper towel as an example, and then just dab it on like that. Okay, so we're going to reuse this brush. So let's just kind of, you don't want to get it wet, just use a paper towel and try to push out as much of that paint as you can. Okay, and then we're going to set this guy off to the side to dry. All right. So now we're going to do the white polka dots on this orange pumpkin. And then we're just going to do the same thing that we did on that. Okay, and then we're just gonna let him dry too. On this pumpkin, I'm gonna do some stripes, and so I'm just gonna take my wide painter's tape, and I want the bottom of it to be orange, and I also want a majority of the top of it to be orange, but a little slither of this to be white. So what I'm gonna do is just align my painter's tape along the bottom here, just so that it's semi-even. If you want to, you can break out the ruler and measure it and make sure it's like super even, but I don't like to do that. So okay, and then I'm just gonna put it so that the tip of it is like that. And I'm just eyeballing it. Like that. And then I'm gonna put another one in the middle here. Okay. So whenever you go to paint, we're gonna paint all the areas that are exposed with orange. And you wanna be sure that you're not pushing the paint into the tape, because it's gonna cause a lot of paint bleed and you're gonna have really messy lines. So instead, what you wanna do is you wanna paint up. So this will keep the paint from going underneath of your tape there. And then you can just go across. And then just let that dry. And then once that first coat dries, you can apply a second coat on top. Now we're not going to do a second coat on the circles because they have a pretty thick layer on there and they don't need a second coat, but we will put one on the stripes here. Actually looks pretty good. And then you just want to remove it. Once your pumpkins are dry, you can start distressing them. So I like to use sandpaper. Typically for this though, I would use my Ryobi palm sander, but since we're inside, I'm just going to use a piece of 150 grit sandpaper. And you just want to focus on the areas that would naturally be worn. So around the edges, like the corners and stuff, and then you just want to do like a quick swipe on the front, and then I will typically do the same thing to the back, but not as much. So and then if you have some like paint that got on the sides there, you can just take your sandpaper and sand that off. And then you can dust this off with your hands, but usually I will use a lint-free cloth. And you just want to get all of that sawdust off of there that you just sanded off, because you don't want that in your wax. Okay, so wax, the less you use, the better, because you can always add more wax to it if you need to, but it's really, really hard to get it off once you get too much on there. So what I typically do is I will just shake it up a little bit, and then so that it goes in the lid, and then I use the lid to dip my brush in, and I usually will just dip like one side of it, and then I will dab it off on my drop cloth here. That's why I have a drop cloth. I'm a really messy crafter. And then you want to focus on the edges first, just like you did when you were sanding, and just kind of swipe around. And you just kind of want to use like a feather touch, I guess, just a really, really light hand to this. Okay, so now that you have all of the edges waxed, then you can go, and then I usually will go in both directions, just kind of a quick swipe, just so that it really gets in all of like the little areas and stuff, and it will just kind of highlight all of those spots. And then I go in the other direction. And you definitely don't want too much wax on your brush for this part, because you want it to look natural. And then if you have lines that are too wispy on here, like those ones are, what I do is I kind of take this part of my brush and I will just move that back and forth to just kind of blend it in a little bit better. So this front of this one's done, and I'm going to do the same thing around the edge here and then on the back. I always finish the backs of my pieces. So I have 4 little girls, and they are crazy wild kids sometimes, and so sometimes our decor kind of falls over, and then everybody can see the unfinished back, and I don't want that. So I usually always finish the backs of my pieces. And then if you notice on the edges here, I'm just kind of going back and forth. That way it will capture the edges. Okay, and then you just want to do the same thing that you did on this one, and you want to do it on these as well. if you want to add like a little accent to it, you can always tie some raffia around your pumpkin. So if you ordered the premium kit, then your kit will come with it. So what I like to do is just kind of line the ends up and then cut it in half, because you don't need it super long. And then you just wrap it around the stem, and then tie a bow. And then if you want to, if you don't like how long those are, you can leave it like that if you want, or you can just trim it. And typically what I'll do is just kind of go in and individually trim these so that they're not super uniform looking. And then that way, if you pull it down too far, kind of like if you're going to cut your own bangs at home, if you pull it down too far and then you know, trim it with your scissors and then let go, they're gonna spring up, so they might end up being a lot shorter than what you wanted. So I usually will just kind of freehand cut the individual raffia pieces. So I hope that you love this tutorial, and if you do, please give it a like, and also be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then head over to my blog at meganplus5.com for even more crafty tutorials. Until next time, bye.